Hello everyone, and welcome to my CBS B&B Full Today channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Steffy threatens to cut off Taylor over Deacon. What did the bold and the beautiful let Steffy have? 5 twinkles of peace? Was it 10? Well, still long it was. Her moment of relative calm is over now, that's for sure. In the Skulk Peep videotape, the show vented at the end of Friday's occasion to tease the action coming the first week of February. Stephanie's namesake granddaughter hits the roof over Taylor's newfound happiness with Cleric. The couple themselves may have said, "I love you," but Steffy hates it, every bit of it. Not only that, but Forrester's CEO will stop at nothing to end the relationship before it's indeed truly begun. But how? What could conceivably tear piecemeal the twain? That's as surprised as anyone that they set up each other. No, Steffy doesn't point out that Sheila will probably kill Taylor, Deacon, or both of them. She informs her mama that if she doesn't break off her lawless love with Hope's father, she'll be cut out of her and the grandkids' lives. Now that's making a splash. Meanwhile, Dylan has a classic rom-com match cute with RJ, complete with transferring his drink splashing to the ground. Since Will and Elektra are as paired up as it gets, maybe Dylan and RJ can commiserate, eventually deciding that they were made for each other in the first place. Eric still got it in a big way. Last but not least, Eric knocks Katie's socks off with his rearmost designs. "They're exactly what I wanted for Logan," she cheers. But of course, indeed, as the fashion house takes a big step toward putting out its first line, a dark pall looms above. Eric's hiring, he reminds Katie, has to be kept a secret. To tell the verity, we love that Eric is being so hush-hush, because we're dying to see the aesthetics on Ridge and Brooke's faces when they see the scapegoat formally again come the toast of the town. Steffy rages over Taylor falling for Deacon, panics over Sheila. The bold and the beautiful B&B exercise videotape for the week of January 5th to 9th reveals that Steffy, Forrester Finnegan, Jacqueline McInnes Wood, will rage over Taylor Hayes, Rebecca Budig, falling for Deacon Sharp, Sean Cannon, and fear over Sheila Sharp's, Kimberlyn Brown implicit response. B&B's daily promo kicks off with Daphne Rose, Muriel Hilaire, hanging to walk out on Carter Walton Lawrence St. Victor. In the exchange, where he gets down on one knee and warns that she's not pushing him down. After Carter says Daphne's not pushing him down, she asks what he thinks he's doing. That's when Carter declares his love and prepares to deliver a marriage offer. And the bold and the beautiful spoilers confirm Daphne's indeed going to marry him soon. Over with Steffy, the exercise videotape reveals that she'll find out about Taylor's unhappy passions for Cleric and completely flip out. You see and fall for a case. He's married to a lunatic. Steffy shouts in Taylor's office in the promo clip. Steffy will make it clear that Taylor needs to shut off whatever she's feeling, since it could end in disaster if Sheila set up out. The last thing Steffy wants is for Taylor to provoke Sheila's wrath and put herself in detriment's way. Next, Katie Logan Spencer, Heather Tom, will meet with Deke Sharp, Harrison Cohn, at Il Giardino, where she'll suggest she might be suitable to help him fulfill his dream of being a fashion developer. In exchange, Katie will hope that Deke might be suitable to help her prove her family wrong. Brooke Logan Forrester, Catherine Kelly Lang, advised that Katie would presumably fail at her new fashion adventure, but Katie will hope Deke's gift will leave her fated for success. There'll be some challenges along the way as Katie launches her fashion house and builds her platoon, but she'll do whatever it takes to show Brooke she's got what it takes to make it in the assiduity. The bold and the beautiful spoilers say Katie will hope for good news, so stay tuned for updates on her sweats to come a fashion megastar. Steffy Forrester Finnegan had always believed that peace, when it came to her life, arrived only in fractions, transitory moments stolen between heads, no way meant to last. And as she stood rigid in the doorway of Taylor's office, her heart pounding with a fury she could slightly contain, she knew with ruinous certainty that whatever fragile calm had compactly settled over her family was now cancelled beyond form. Taylor's face, softened by a gleam Steffy honored each too well, the unmistakable expression of a woman allowing herself hope again, only fueled the fire burning inside Steffy's casket, because that gleam didn't belong in a world where Deacon Sharp was, not in a macrocosm where Sheila Carter still breathed, watched, awaited. To Steffy, this wasn't a love story in its immaturity. It was the opening chapter of a tragedy she had spent times trying to overrun, and she could formerly hear the echoes of riots, sanitarium observers, shattered glass, and lives ever altered by trusting the wrong people. Taylor's asseveration that her passions were unanticipated, sincere, and predicated in mending did nothing to soften Steffi's resoluteness. If anything, it hardened it, because Steffy had learned the brutal assignment that good intentions didn't shield anyone from disastrous consequences, especially when Sheila Sharp lurked like a loaded armament with a hair detector temper. Steffi's claim, delivered with a cold clarity that indeed shocked her, wasn't born of atrocity but of terror, the kind that takes root deep in a mama's soul when she imagines her children caught in the crossfire of someone differently's reckless love. Cutting Taylor off from her life, from her grandchildren, was unbelievable. Yet Steffy saw no other way to draw a line bold enough to force her mama to choose safety over passion, reality over vision. In Steffy's mind, Deacon Sharp wasn't simply a defective man seeking redemption. He was a gateway through which Sheila could demete their lives, and Steffy refused to go her family's future on the stopgap that this time, ever, effects would end else. As the shock of Steffy's trouble settled over Taylor, it gurgled outward, touching every corner of the Forrester and Logan worlds, because nothing in Los Angeles ever was in insulation for long. Word spread snappily, as it always did, rumored through hallways, changed over coffee mugs, deconstructed behind unrestricted doors, and each retelling stoned the edges of the conflict until it came commodity larger than a mama and son at war. Ridge set up himself torn in familiar ways, caught between his instinct to cover Taylor and his understanding of Steffi's fear, a fear he himself had felt too numerous times to dismiss. Brooke, watching from the sidelines with an admixture of concern and sick recognition, understood better than anyone how dangerous love could come when tangled with old injuries and undetermined histories. Yet indeed she plotted to attune Taylor's pursuit of happiness with the inarguable trouble Sheila represented. Meanwhile, Deacon, recently buoyed by the intoxicating possibility of love that felt pure and untainted by his once miscalculations, remained unconscious to the full extent of Steffi's fury, ignorant that forces far more important than his own redemption narrative were formerly marshalling against him. Across city, life continued to weave its complicated patterns, offering moments of frivolity that only served to heighten the discrepancy with the storm brewing beneath the face. Dylan's accidental collision with RJ, complete with revealed drinks and awkward justifications, sounded nearly charmingly mundane in a megacity addicted to catastrophe, yet there was commodity still significant in the way their eyes dallied a moment too long, in the participated horse laugh that followed their clumsiness, as though fate itself was gently nudging two people toward a connection neither had been searching for but both might soon need. In a world where connections frequently exploded with dramatic intensity, this slow, organic spark felt refreshingly different. A memorial that not all love stories began with treason or peril, though history suggested indeed the most innocent onsets infrequently stayed that way for long. At Forrester Creations, Eric's quiet rejuvenescence fitted a different kind of pressure into the air, one laced with expectation rather than fear. His designs, met with Katie's genuine delight, represented further than a creative triumph. They represented heritage, applicability, and the stubborn turndown to fade still into the background. Eric's asseveration on secretiveness added a nearly mischievous exhilaration to the bid, as if he were orchestrating a grand reveal fated to shake Ridge and Brooke to their core, and Katie, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose, clung to the occasion with both hands. Her determination to prove herself, to her family, to Brooke, to herself, drove her forward despite the dubieties that rumored she might be chasing an insolvable dream. Aligning herself with Deke Sharp was a calculated threat, one that imaged in quieter ways the adventure Taylor was taking with Cleric, and though Katie framed it as a professional alliance, the emotional swings were insolvable to ignore. She wanted confirmation, independence, and success on her own terms, and she was willing to face review, lapses, and indeed heartache to achieve it. Yet indeed as intentions soared and new connections formed, the shadow of Sheila Carter impended ever closer, an implied presence that shaped opinions and fueled paranoia without ever demanding to appear on screen. Steffi's fear wasn't unsupported. It was embedded in memory, in lived experience, in the scars left by a woman who thrived on chaos and destruction. The bare idea of Sheila discovering Taylor's involvement with Deacon transferred Steffy twisting, her imagination conjuring scripts too terrible to articulate, scripts she was determined to help at any cost. Her rage, while explosive, was also deeply strategic, driven by a belief that control over people, over circumstances, over issues was the only defense against ineluctable disaster. And yet, beneath that control lurked a vulnerability Steffy infrequently allowed herself to admit, the fear that no matter how hard she fought, no matter how numerous lines she drew, the history had a way of clawing its way back into the present. As the week unfolded, pressures escalated, alliances shifted, and choices made in moments of emotional intensity hovered to alter lives permanently. Taylor set up herself at a crossroads, torn between a son she loved fiercely and a man who awakened corridor of her she allowed. Long buried, while Deacon faced the painful reality that redemption, no matter how sincere, didn't abolish the consequences of who he'd formerly been, or the troubles attached to loving him now. Katie pressed forward with her fashion dreams, ignorant that success might come at the price of family harmony, while Eric prepared for a reveal that promised both exculpation and bouleversement. And nearly just beyond the edges of every scene, Sheila awaited, case imperceptive, seeing the fractures forming, ready to exploit them when the time was right. In true bold and the beautiful fashion, love, fear, ambition and treason gathered, setting the stage for competitions that would leave no bone untouched, because in this world, peace was no way endless, happiness was always tentative, and every choice carried consequences that echoed far beyond the moment they were made. The shockwaves from Steffy's claim didn't stop at Taylor's office door. They spread like cracks through glass, unnoticeable at first but heightening with every fleeting hour, altering the emotional armature of the Forrester family in ways none of them could completely comprehend. Taylor, left alone after Steffy's explosive exit, plotted to undergird her breathing as the weight of her son's words settled heavily in her casket, not as in blameworthiness but as a judgment, one that demanded she choose between the part she had defined herself by for decades and the fragile pledge of happiness she had only just allowed herself to feel. For times, Taylor had devoted her life to healing others while denying herself the veritably grace she specified. And now, faced with the possibility of losing access to her grandchildren, the living symbols of durability, innocence and hope, she was forced to defy a verity she had long avoided, that love, when it arrived late and suddenly, carried pitfalls far lesser than heartache. Deacon Sharp wasn't simply a man she watched for. He was a catalyst, one who restarted old injuries, provoked old fears, and challenged the precisely constructed boundaries she had reckoned upon to survive a life shaped by tragedy and loss. Away, Steffy's fury didn't subside formerly she left Taylor before. Rather, it converted into a grim drive, a need to recapture control before events spun beyond her reach. As CEO, she was oriented to decisive action, to bending issues through authority and restraint, but this extremity was particular, and that made it infinitely more dangerous. Every memory of Sheila's violence, manipulation, and preoccupation replayed in her mind with cruel clarity, each one buttressing her belief that preemptive atrocity was preferable to reactive desolation. She induced herself that cutting Taylor off wasn't an act of discipline but of protection, a firewall erected between her children and a woman who, still unintentionally, was inviting chaos back into their lives. And yet, beneath Steffy's rigid certainty lay a painful contradiction. She loved her mama deeply, and the veritably allowed of ramifying that bond left a concave pang she refused to admit. As news of the conflict filtered through the extended family, responses varied from quiet concern to slightly concealed judgment. Ridge set up himself, pulled into the familiar curve of divided commitment, his instincts prompting him to shield Taylor from insulation, while his rational mind honored the legality of Steffy's fear. He'd witnessed Sheila's capacity for destruction firsthand, had undervalued her formerly and paid dearly for it, and though he wished he could dismiss Steffy's response as inordinate, he knew better than to ignore the warning signs. Brooke, watching Ridge scuffle with his heart, felt an unsettling sense of déjà vu, fading in Taylor's situation echoes of her own once opinions. Moments when love felt redemptive but eventually demanded a ruinous risk. She wanted to believe that people could change, that Deacon's growth was genuine, but experience had tutored her that history infrequently stayed buried for long in their world. Cleric himself, decreasingly apprehensive that forces were aligning against him, plotted to attune the sanguinity he felt with the hostility he tasted closing in. His affection for Taylor was sincere, embedded not in performance but in collective understanding, in the quiet moments where participated vulnerability replaced judgment. Yet he wasn't naive enough to ignore the reality of his character, nor the inarguable fact that his connection to Sheila rendered every relationship he touched innately unpredictable. As he grappled with the possibility that loving Taylor might bring her everything, Deacon faced the most delicate test of his redemption, whether walking down, formerly again, was the ultimate act of selflessness or simply another form of poltroonery disguised as immolation. Meanwhile, life continued to unfold in resemblant narratives that both varied and rounded the central conflict. Dylan and RJ's unanticipated hassle dallied in subtle ways, their brief commerce replaying in quiet moments, planting the seeds of curiosity neither could relatively dismiss. In a megacity defined by grand gestures and dramatic snares, their connection felt understated yet promising, a memorial that closeness could crop organically, without docket or manipulation. Whether fate intended to nurture that spark or extinguish it remained uncertain, but its presence added another subcast to the evolving shade of connections, intimating at unborn corners and complications. At Forrester Creations, Eric's covert involvement invested the company with an turnabout of suspension. His designs, celebrated by Katie as exactly what Logan represented further than aesthetic success. They were a protestation of applicability, a quiet rebellion against being sidelined by time and circumstance. Katie, amped by the collaboration, threw herself into the work with a vehemence born of long-suppressed ambition. She was determined to prove that her vision, her instincts, and her adaptability were enough to sculpt a place for herself independent of her family's prospects. Partnering with Deke Sharp was both a professional adventure and a particular statement, an assertion that she'd no longer be defined by the dubieties of those who believed she demanded the fiber to succeed on her own. Yet indeed, as creative instigation erected, secretiveness cast its own shadow. Eric's asseveration that his part remain retired heightened the stakes, transubstantiating what might have been a straightforward adventure into a high-threat bit poised to shock the very people who believed they understood the company's direction. Katie, apprehensive that success could provoke resentment as fluently as admiration, prepared herself for counter-reaction, especially from Brooke, whose dubitation dallied like a challenge Katie was determined to overcome. The brewing reveal promised triumph and fermentation in equal measure, buttressing the notion that progress within the Forrester route was infrequently achieved without collateral damage. As the days passed, pressures escalated toward ineluctable battle. Taylor set up herself decreasingly insulated. Her attempts to reason with Steffy met with unwavering resistance, each discussion ending with the same stark reality that her happiness had come a liability in her son's eyes. Torn between motherly instinct and particular fulfillment, Taylor questioned whether love was worth the cost of disgruntlement, whether choosing herself, indeed formerly, justified the pain it foisted on those she cherished most. Cleric, seeing her fermentation, prepared himself for the possibility that their story might end before it truly began, visited by the knowledge that his presence alone was enough to fracture families. And also, threading through every plot like a dark auspice, was the implied certainty that Sheila Carter would not remain on the sidelines ever. Whether driven by covetousness, preoccupation, or a crooked sense of fortune, her implicit response impended large, shaping opinions and fueling fear without a single word spoken. Steffy's fear, Taylor's vacillation, Deacon's restraint, all were told by the same specter, a memorial that some pitfalls no way truly vanish, they simply stay for the right moment to resurface. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, love was no way simple, redemption was always queried, and peace was only as a brief interim between storms. As alliances strained and secrets hovered to erupt into the open, each character stood on the point of choices that would define not just their futures but the heritage they left before. Knowing that formerly crossed, some lines could no way be redrawn. The pressure reached a slow, suffocating pustule as each character moved through their days with the uneasy mindfulness that commodity unrecoverable was approaching. Steffy, outwardly composed in her part as CEO, carried her wrathfulness like armor, issuing directives at Forrester Creations with ruthless effectiveness while intimately covering every thread that connected Deacon Sharp to her family. To her, alert was survival, and she refused to be caught unrehearsed again. Yet in rare, unguarded moments, when she watched her children laugh without fear, mistrustfulness crept by, brooding that her claim might bring her the veritably closeness she claimed to cover. Taylor, decreasingly torn, sought retreat in her work, guiding cases through trauma while ignoring her own, but the irony was lost on her. Each session reminded her that mending needed honesty, courage, and the amenability to face pain rather than run from it. The question that visited her was whether choosing Cleric was an act of tone respect or tone destruction. The absence of her grandchildren counted heavily, turning silence into its own form of discipline, one that eroded her resoluteness with every end night. Cleric, watching Taylor struggle, scuffled with an each too familiar impulse to remove himself from the equation. Redemption, he realized, wasn't just about getting more, but about knowing when your presence did further detriment than good. The study of walking down shattered him, yet the indispensable, staying and risking Taylor's relationship with her son, felt inversely unsupportable. For the first time, love demanded a immolation he wasn't sure he could make. Meanwhile, at Forrester Creations, Eric's secret work edged closer to disclosure, the expectation titillating the halls. Katie, buoyed by early signs of success, dared to imagine a future where she stood on her own achievements, not as a supporting player but as a creative force. Still, she tasted the counter-reaction coming. The moment when pride would collide with wounded self-esteem in long-standing battles. And beneath it all, the quiet certainty remained: Sheila Carter was out there, apprehensive, watching and staying. No matter how fiercely Steffi tried to control the narrative, chaos had a way of chancing cracks. As love, fear, and ambition gathered, the stage was set for a reckoning that would test commitment, expose secrets, and remind everyone that in this world, peace was always temporary and the consequences of passion were no way far before.